Mara's fingers trembled as she worked the hidden clasp on Jonah's collar, the ceramic cool and unyielding against her skin. The device hummed faintly, a constant reminder of the Accord's invisible leash, but she'd found the flaw months ago. A micro-fracture in the housing from a careless drop during one of his tantrums. In the dim glow of the habitat pod's night cycle, she eased it open, the seal hissing like a held breath released. Jonah sat still on the edge of his sleeping pallet, eyes wide but trusting, his small frame tense under the thin blanket. At 12 cycles, he was all sharp angles and unspoken questions, the kind that could unravel everything if voiced too loud. "Easy now," she whispered, her voice a thread in the quiet. The collar slipped free, and she tucked it beneath the pallet's edge, nestling it into the folds where the surveillance drones wouldn't catch the anomaly. The household's blind spot was narrow, only during these off-peak hours when the alien family's rhythms synced to their own rest cycle. But it was enough, for now. Mara's heart thudded against her ribs, a war drum she forced to quiet. If the scanners picked up the absence, even for a minute, alarms would scream through the network. But this test mattered, proved they could breathe without the weight. Jonah touched his neck, fingers tracing bare skin, a ghost of surprise crossing his face. "It itches without it," he said softly, not a complaint, just fact. Mara nodded, pulling him into a quick hug, her protectiveness flaring like a shield. She couldn't lose him, not to reconditioning, not to the Accord's endless care, but freedom. That came with teeth, and she was sharpening hers in secret. Across the sprawl of the Capitol dome, Consul Varu glided through the sterile corridors of a model household, his iridescent robes whispering against the polished floors. The air hummed with a low buzz of compliance fields, designed to soothe human wards into docility. He paused at the observation pane, watching a cluster of humans in their enclosure, tended, fed, their movements predictable as clockwork. One female, mid-20s by human metrics, knelt polishing a display artifact, her collar pulsing green with contentment signals. "Exemplary," Varu murmured to his aide, a junior custodian named Lyra, who hovered at his elbow with a datapad, but his gaze sharpened on a faint irregularity, a human male in the corner, fidgeting with his sleeve. Minor, perhaps, but reports from the outer sectors nagged at him. A glitch in a transport pod, 2 wards exchanging glances too long, unprompted. Harmless on the surface, but Varu knew better. Hierarchies frayed at the edges. "Initiate full biometric rescans," he ordered, voice smooth as oiled chitin. "Every ward in the dome, starting with these models, cross-reference against baseline obedience matrices. No exceptions." Lyra's mandibles clicked in acknowledgement, but Varu felt the undercurrent of resistance in her hesitation. The Accord's stability demanded vigilance, chaos bred from unchecked autonomy. He couldn't afford to lose his authority to whispers of unrest. Not when the pet program was his legacy. Lyra transmitted the directive, and Varu turned away, the weight of the dome's vastness pressing on him. Order wasn't cruelty. It was necessity. Humans, with their fragile forms and turbulent minds, needed the structure. Without it, they'd devour themselves. In the shadowed annex of the Behavioral Analysis Wing, Elin hunched over his console, the glow casting harsh lines across his scaled face. The request form blinked on his screen, a deliberate stall. Extra metrics on human vocal inflections, cross-sourced from recent household logs. He hit send, directing it straight to Varu's queue. The console's inspection tour was cutting too close. Mara's signal had come through the encrypted channel an hour ago. Time running thin for her lesson. Island's claws tapped the edge of the desk, a rhythm born of unease. Curiosity had drawn him to the humans years back, their chaotic emotions a puzzle against the Accord's rigid calm. But helping Mara, that skirted treason, bargaining his career for glimpses of something raw. He thought of his protégé, young Tira, waiting in the outer lab, her bright eyes, her future tied to his standing. Ostracism would shatter that. Yet the data Mara promised, unfiltered human responses, it pulled at him like gravity. Varu's response pinged back almost immediately. Metrics approved. Delay inspection by 1 cycle. Elan exhaled, the tension easing from his shoulders. Mara had her window. He leaned back, staring at the holographic feed of a collared human in simulation, obedient, but with that flicker of defiance in the eyes. Reducing cruelty, he told himself. That's all this was. Pragmatism, not betrayal. Back in the habitat pod, Mara unrolled the thin flex sheet across the low table, its surface flickering to life with forbidden symbols. Basic human script, pieced together from scavenged fragments. Jonah knelt beside her, his bare neck a vulnerability that made her glance at the vents every few seconds. The lullaby recording was next, a sliver of audio chip, disguised as a grooming tool, slipped into his palm during their earlier embrace. "Listen close," she said, voice low and steady. "When it plays, you fight it. Feel the pull, but push back. We measure how deep they buried it." The lesson plan was half tactics, half therapy, eroding the conditioning layer by layer. Jonah nodded, his impulsiveness simmering just beneath, a flaw she both loved and feared. He wanted freedom now, with fists if needed, but she knew the cost of rushing. She activated the chip. A soft melody unfurled, alien composed but laced with human echoes, crooned by reconditioned singers to embed obedience. Jonah's eyes glazed for a heartbeat, body slumping forward in conditioned response. Mara's breath caught. The metrics on the flex sheet spiked, heart rate steady, neural compliance at 87%. But then he shook it off, jaw clenching, fingers digging into his thighs. "No," he muttered, voice raw. "Not yours." Pride swelled in her chest, mixed with terror. It worked. He was breaking free, piece by piece. But the pod's air felt thicker, the surveillance blind spot closing like a trap. The handler arrived unannounced, a squat alien from the maintenance crew, his uniform emblazoned with Accord sigils. He lumbered into the pod during the shift overlap, datapad in hand for routine checks. Jonah was still kneeling by the table, the chip clutched tight, when the handler barked the cue. "Ward, designate Jonah. Compliance posture, now." The melody's echo lingered in Jonah's ears, a siren call twisting his gut. But Mara's lessons burned hotter. He froze, then lunged, not with words, but teeth. His jaws clamped on the handler's arm, ceramic implants from the collar's era no longer there to dull the bite. Flesh tore, a wet rip echoing in the confined space. The handler yelped, staggering back, iridescent blood welling from the gash. Visible, ugly, a wound that wouldn't scan as minor. Alarms wailed through the pod's network, red lights pulsing like wounds of their own. Mara surged forward, yanking Jonah away, her mind racing. "Run! Hide the chip!" But the damage was done. The handler slumped against the wall, clutching his arm, his comms already broadcasting the breach. Administrative lockdown initiated. Drones swarmed the vents. Varu received the alert mid-stride in the central atrium, his aide thrusting the datapad forward. "Incident report. Human ward assaults handler. Wound confirmed. Collar anomaly detected." His mandibles tightened, a rare crack in his composure. Hubris, he'd called it once. Believing the program infallible. Now this. A single byte rippling outward. "Schedule the display," he commanded, voice like grinding stone. "Public, in the Grand Plaza. All problem wards to be presented. Reconditioned on spectacle. And mandate collar integrity checks across every household. Surgical if needed." Lyra nodded, but Varu saw the fear in her eyes. Chaos loomed, threatening the Accord's paternal veil. He couldn't let it spread. Control, always control, even if it meant carving deeper. The announcement blasted through the dome's comms an hour later. a cold broadcast overlaying every feed. Citizens of the Accord, a public display will commence at cycle's end. Reaffirmation of the pet program. All Guardians report anomalies immediately. In the habitat pod, now swarming with enforcers, Mara held Jonah close amid the chaos, his face streaked with defiant tears. The choice clawed at her. Flee now, slip into the undergrid with him, abandon the hidden network of other escaped humans she'd sworn to protect. Or expose them. Trade their secrets to buy time, save Jonah from the reconditioning slab. Her protectiveness warred with the bigger fight, the moral fracture widening. Freedom wasn't clean. It demanded blood, and she wondered if hers would be next. Mara's arms tightened around Jonah as the enforcers' boots thudded through the pod's corridors, their scanners humming like distant thunder. The air reeked of ozone from the disrupted fields, and Jonah's breath came in ragged bursts against her neck, his tears hot and unyielding. She stroked his hair, whispering nonsense about the undergrid's hidden lights, anything to drown out the broadcast's echo. Flee or fight. The choice gnawed deeper, a blade twisting in her gut. The network she'd built, fragile threads of whispers and stolen moments, hung by the same thread as Jonah's life. Losing him would shatter her, but abandoning the others? That betrayal would hollow her out worse. By the time the enforcers cleared the pod, finding nothing but a scuffed floor and a child's tantrum, Mara had already mapped her next move. The announcement demanded anomalies reported, but anomalies were her specialty now. She waited until the dome's lights dimmed for the rest cycle, then slipped Jonah into the maintenance vents with a murmured promise. "Stay low, love. I'll be back before the feeds wake." The neighboring pods were a risk, but necessity sharpened her edges. She moved like a shadow, palms flat against the cool alloy walls, ears tuned to the faint whir of patrol drones. The first ward, Ilara, answered her coded knock, a soft scrape of nails on the door panel. Ilara's eyes, wide and scarred from a recent adjustment, flicked to the hall before she pulled Mara inside. The pod was cramped, lit by a single glow strip, and Ilara's guardian slumbered in the adjacent chamber, oblivious. "You're insane," Ilara whispered, her voice a threadbare rasp. But there was hunger in it, the kind Mara recognized from her own mirror. Ilara had been a seamstress once, mending alien finery until her fingers bled. Now she hid bruises under long sleeves. Not insane, prepared. Mara kept her tone even, polite as a caregiver soothing a fretful charge. "The broadcasts are tightening. We train now, or we wait for callers. You in?" Ilara hesitated, glancing at the two younger humans huddled in the corner. Her charges, siblings she'd claimed as kin after their original guardian culled the weak. They were thin, all bones and wary eyes, but their fists clenched with that human fire Mara had learned to spot. "Show us," Ilara said finally, and Mara did. She started with stealth, how to ghost through vents without rattling the grates, how to time breaths against the dome's pulse. The siblings watched, mimicking her crouch, their small frames folding into silence. Next came lockwork, improvised picks from scavenged wire, twisting with the precision of a surgeon's hand. Mara's own scars itched as she demonstrated, remembering the nights she'd practiced on pantry seals, driven by the fear of Jonah's next lesson. Biting techniques last. Not wild snaps, but calculated strikes to tendons, eyes, the soft underbelly where alien physiology betrayed them. "We're not pets," she told them, voice low and steady. "We're survivors, polite until we're not." Ilara's nod was grim, her motive clear. Protect the young ones, even if it meant baring teeth. But her flaws showed in the tremor of her hands. She'd hesitate in the crush, that old caregiver instinct to yield. The siblings, though, absorbed it like dry earth, their impulsiveness a mirror to Jonah's. By the session's end, sweat slicked their skin, and Mara slipped out with a plan for the next pod. The second recruit was Thomas, a broad-shouldered laborer from the hydro bays, his pod reeking of nutrient slurry. He didn't hesitate long. His guardian had marked him for reassignment after a minor defiance, and Thomas's bulk hid a rage that simmered polite until provoked. "Teach me to break more than locks," he growled. But Mara saw the crack, his loyalty to a hidden mate in another district, the fear that one wrong move would doom her too. They drilled in whispers, bodies pressed close in the dim light. Stealth for Thomas meant muffling his heavy steps. Lockwork tested his thick fingers. Biting. He grinned, fangs bared in a way that made Alara flinch when they converged later. The group was small, 5 humans total, including Jonah, but it felt like an army in the making, competent, complex, dangerous beneath the calm. Word of the session spread through coded signals, a ripple in the undergrid. But drills needed cover, and that's where Elin came in. Mara met him in a disused service alcove, the air thick with dust and the faint tang of coolant. Elin's tendrils twitched nervously, his lab coat pristine despite the grime. He was no warrior, this behaviorist. Curious, pragmatic, his science a shield against the Accord's cruelties. But he'd seen humans up close, studied their cues, and that curiosity had cracked open a door for Mara. "I need heartbeat masks," she said flatly, no preamble. "For the drills, drones pick us up otherwise." Elin's eyes, compound, shimmering, flicked over her. He cared for his protege, a young analyst he'd shielded from Varu's purges, and his career balanced on a knife's edge. Betray the insurgents, and he kept his lab. Help, and ostracism loomed. "Tampered microsensors," he murmured, sliding a vial from his coat. "Tiny orbs, no bigger than beads, designed to scramble biosigns. They'll hide pulses for cycles, but I want access. Observations during your exercises. Data on stress responses." Mara's jaw tightened. Bargaining with an alien, even a sympathetic one, tasted like ash. But Jonah's face flashed in her mind, his impulsive strikes needing tempering. "Limited," she said. "You watch, you don't interfere, and you delete the files after." Agreed. His tendrils stilled, a moral fracture in his poise. He reduced cruelty in theory, but self-preservation made him haggle lives. She palmed the vial, and they parted like ghosts. The drills escalated under the sensor's veil. In a simulated breach, vents pried open, shadows darting through mock corridors. Jonah took point. He was 12 cycles now, bonded to Mara since infancy, his autonomy a fire that burned hot and reckless. "We hit fast," she coached, but Jonah's eyes gleamed with that shortcut violence, the belief that pain bought freedom quicker than plans. The target was an older alien matron, borrowed from a neutral household for the exercise, padded, compliant, her role to feign guardianship. But Jonah lunged too soon, his small frame a blur of calculated fury. He mauled her arm, teeth sinking into the joint with a crack that echoed. The matron shrieked, real agony twisting her features as bones snapped under his grip. Blood welled, iridescent and slick, and the pod erupted. Enforcers swarmed before Mara could pull him back. Jonah spat, defiant tears streaking his face again, while the matron clutched her shattered hand, her cries broadcasting live through the household feeds. What started as clandestine training spiraled into a household incident, then a dome-wide alarm. Political scandal bloomed overnight. A feral pet assaulting a respected elder, the feeds framing it as proof of human volatility. Varu seized it like a weapon. From his console's spire, high above the domes, he orchestrated the response with bureaucratic precision. Mara watched the broadcast from a hidden nook. Jonah curled against her, his impulsiveness now a chain around them all. Varu's face filled the screens, his scales gleaming under spotlights, voice smooth as polished stone. "The pet program ensures harmony," he intoned, philosophy woven into terror. But anomalies demand correction. Effective immediately. Shock-enabled collars for all mixed-district humans. Nightly curfews enforced. Guardians report deviations or face reclassification. The collars hummed into place across the grids, thin bands that zapped at defiance, their geography mapping every street, every pod. Stakes rose. Mara's network shrank under the curfew's weight, patrols thickening the night. Varu's hubris shone through. He believed control instrumental, hierarchies eternal. But it blinded him to the humans' quiet competence, their moral knots tightening into resolve. Mara acted fast. Forging transit papers was a caregiver's trick twisted dark. She hacked a terminal in the undergrid, declaring a handful of humans decommissioned. Euthanasia stamps for the old or infirm, now covers for escape. Alara's siblings first, then Thomas's mate, bundled into crates marked for disposal. Decommissioned stock to supply depot, the papers read. Polite lies that bought passage to a temporary sanctuary in an abandoned freight hub. Mara oversaw the move herself, Jonah at her side, his mauling a ghost between them. The depot was no paradise. Dank, echoing with drips, but it was defensible, a step toward the bigger fight. Her protectiveness flared as she checked their hides, but the cost lingered. One slip and decommissioned became real. Far above, in the spire's sterile halls, Island paced his lab. Varu's summons had come mid-cycle, the console's tendrils far above. In the spire's sterile halls, Island paced his lab. Varu's summons had come mid-cycle, the console's tendrils coiling in the holographic missive like a noose tightening. The behaviorist's fronds quivered, his mind racing through the implications. His protégé, young Lyra, was already under scrutiny, her questions about human adaptability too probing for the Accord's liking. If he didn't comply, containment would follow, surgical and final. The chamber doors hissed open, admitting Varu himself. The consul's form filled the space, his armored exoskeleton gleaming under the cold lights, multiple limbs gesturing with precise authority. "Elin," Varu intoned, voice a resonant hum through the translator implant. "Your insights have been invaluable, but the agitators multiply. The pet program demands purity. We stage a display at cycle's end, televised, public. Names will be extracted, coordinates surrendered, order restored." Island's core tightened. He had fed Mara scraps of data before, neural dampeners frequencies, patrol patterns, curiosity overriding caution. But this was different. Varu's optics fixed on him, unblinking. "Your protégé's records show anomalies, enthusiasm for the subjects bordering on sympathy. Contain it, Elin, or I will." The threat landed like a shock prod. Lyra's face flickered in Elin's thoughts, her bright inquiries, her potential. He couldn't lose her to reconditioning. What do you require?" "A list. Partial will suffice for the broadcast. Safe houses. Prove your loyalty." Island's manipulators hesitated, then accessed his secure terminal. He pulled coordinates. 3 sites, including Mara's outer warrens, but not the core. Lies by omission, a fragile shield. As he transferred the file, his fronds drooped. This will shame them, force betrayals. Varu accepted the data with a satisfied ripple. Shame is the tool of domestication. They will name their own to survive. Prepare the neural interrogators. The display begins soon. In the Undercity's shadowed plaza, the holographic screens flickered to life, bathing the crowd in azure glow. Mara crouched in the safe house's dim alcove, her breath steady despite the knot in her gut. The air hummed with recycled dampness, laced with the tang of unwashed bodies and fear sweat. Around her, allies huddled. Tessa, sharp-eyed and unyielding, sharpening a scavenged blade. Others, faces gaunt from months of hiding. Jonah sat close, his young frame tense, fingers tracing the faint scars from his old collar. The broadcast opened with Varu's image dominating every screen, towering, benevolent in his paternal facade. Citizens of the Accord, he declared. Tendrils weaving through the air like a conductor's baton. Our pet program ensures harmony, yet domestic agitators sow chaos, rejecting the care that elevates them. Today, we display the cost of rebellion. Names will be given, safe havens purged, return to order, or face reclassification. Mara's jaw clenched. She had built this network from whispers in alien households, escaped humans, bonded pairs like her and Jonah, piecing together tech scraps to jam signals, evade trackers. But Varoo's eyes, even projected, seemed to pierce the walls. He knows something, she murmured to Jonah. Stay low. Jonah's gaze burned with that impulsive fire she both loved and feared. We fight back, not hide. Not yet, she said, hand on his shoulder, protective instinct flaring. Losing him would unravel her, the boy she'd raised from a frightened whelp, now a symbol others rallied to. But his recklessness could doom them all. Alarms shattered the moment. Distant klaxons wailed, boots thundering in the corridors outside. Raid! Tessa hissed, blade ready. The door exploded inward, Accord guards swarming, hulking figures in powered exosuits, stun lances crackling. Mara shoved Jonah behind a crate, grabbing a pulse emitter from the stash. Scatter! To the vents! Shots sizzled through the air, scorching walls. Tessa lunged, her blade slicing a guard's joint, but another tackled her, pinning her with crushing weight. Mara fired, dropping two, her shots precise from years of quiet target practice in hidden corners. Humans weren't just pets. They adapted, turned weakness to weapon, but numbers overwhelmed. Allies fell, dragged, bound, screaming names under neural prods. Mara fought toward Tessa, heart pounding. Hold on! But guards hauled the woman away, her eyes meeting Mara's in defiant silence. Jonah vanished into the chaos, a shadow slipping free. Or so she hoped. The plaza erupted into the display's heart. Hollow screens amplified the raid footage live, Varoo's voice narrating the justice. Captives were marched onto the central platform, a raised dais ringed by energy fields and cheering Accord citizens. Tessa, bloodied but unbroken, was first. Her wrists bound in restraint cuffs, she spat at the guards. You call this care? You're the animals. Varoo stepped forward, his form casting a long shadow. Reclassification for the untrainable. A surgical drone descended, its arms whirring. The crowd murmured approval as it activated. A clean incision, neural severance. Tessa's body jerked once, then slumped, life ebbing in seconds. No blood, just efficiency. The screen zoomed in, broadcasting the final twitch to every corner of the city. Mara, dragged in with the others, felt bile rise. She'd seen executions in households, quiet culls of problematic pets. But this was spectacle, designed to break spirits. Her mind raced, the platform's edges, guard patterns, the consort at Varoo's side, a minor official, pompous in ceremonial robes. Opportunity flickered. As guards shoved her toward the interrogator, Mara twisted, feigning weakness. Her hand brushed a loose panel. A service access, jury-rigged by insurgents months ago. With a surge of adrenaline, she yanked it free, the concealed vibro knife activating in her palm. She lunged not at Varoo, too far, too guarded, but at the consort, the blade sinking into the soft underbelly of his exoskeleton. The alien gurgled, fronds flailing as he collapsed, violet ichor spilling across the platform. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Screens captured every angle. Mara didn't hesitate. She slashed the prisoner's bonds beside her, a young human manacled for petty theft, now free in the shock. Run! She snarled, shoving him toward the edge. Chaos bloomed. Guards fired wildly, energy bolts scorching the air. The prisoner bolted into the throng, vanishing amid panicked civilians. Mara dodged a lance, her body moving on instinct. Roll, strike, evade. Humans weren't fragile. They were survivors, polite in submission until the mask cracked. But this act sealed her fate. Irreversible, broadcast to billions. No more covert whispers. She was the face of defiance now. In the melee, Jonah emerged from the shadows, eyes wide with fury. "Mara!" He charged a guard, grabbing a fallen stun lance, his swing wild but effective, crackling against armor, buying her a second. But reinforcements poured in. A guard's tendril whipped out, coiling around Jonah's neck, yanking him down. He thrashed, cursing, but the neural collar clamped on. New model, sleek and unyielding, its lights pulsing red. Programmed to block insurgent signals. It hummed to life, sending jolts through his nerves until he went limp, eyes glazing. "No!" Mara's scream tore free, raw and animal. She fired again, dropping the guard, but more swarmed. Jonah was dragged away, collared prize in tow, toward Varu's looming form. Varu raised a limb, optics gleaming. The agitator leader, and her ward, fitting. His voice boomed over the speakers. "A bounty, full accord resources for her capture. Containment units, purge the warrens, no mercy for the undomesticated." Mara bolted as the platform descended into frenzy. She dove into the crowd, weaving through alien bodies. Some recoiling, others reaching to claim the reward. Her knife dripped ichor, her side burned from a graze. Allies scattered or fell, Tessa's body a stark warning on the screens. She plunged into the urban warrens, the labyrinth of rusted underlevels where light barely pierced. Alone now, breath ragged, Mara's mind fractured. Jonah, collared, signals jammed, a puppet if they broke him. Varu's bounty lit every screen, hunter drones already whining overhead. Assassinate the consul? Storm his spire, suicidal odds. Or crack that collar's programming, find Elin, the only one with the codes. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Footsteps echoed behind. She pressed on, the weight of her choice settling like chains. Freedom's price was blood, and hers was just beginning. Footsteps echoed behind her, a ragged rhythm in the dim underbelly of the transit tunnels. Mara didn't turn, her breath steady despite the burn in her legs. The air down here was thick with the tang of rust and recycled moisture, the kind that clung to your skin like regret. She knew who it was without looking. Kale and Lena, the two she'd pulled from a scrap heap of a holding pen 2 nights back. And Jonah, always a step too eager. They caught up as she reached the junction, where flickering service lights cast long shadows across the concrete. Kyle, broad-shouldered and scarred from a botched reconditioning attempt, wiped sweat from his brow. "You run like the Accords on your tail already," he muttered. But there was no bite in it. Lena, quieter, with eyes that darted like she still expected a collar to tighten, just nodded, clutching the satchel of scavenged tech. Jonah slid in beside Mara, his young face set in that familiar mix of defiance and need. He was barely out of his teens, raised in the soft cages of alien households, but the fire in him burned hot. "What's the play? You said we hit something big tonight." Mara stopped at a rusted grate, prying it open with a tool from her belt. Beyond lay the maintenance warrens, a forgotten vein beneath the city. "We do. Custodial registry server, heart of their legal chains." She dropped through first, landing soft on the damp floor below. The others followed, Jonah last, his boots scraping as he sealed the grate. In the cramped alcove they'd claimed as a bolt hole, a forgotten pump room lined with jury-rigged screens and flickering data pads. Mara unrolled Elin's covert notes. The alien behaviorist had slipped them to her through a dead drop 2 days prior, encoded in what looked like routine lab reports. She traced the schematics with a calloused finger, the lines glowing faintly under her touch. Servers in the sub-levels of the central archive. Biometric locks, patrol drones, but Elin's marked a blind spot. Vent access from the east conduit. Kyle leaned in, his breath sour with unwashed fatigue. And what's the alien want for this? Nothing's free with them. "Immunity," Mara said flatly, folding the notes away. "For his protégé." Some young tech in his lab who's been feeding us scraps. Elin's playing both sides, but we need the override code he promised. Lena shifted, her voice a whisper. We trust that. One wrong code and we're tagged for reconditioning. We don't trust, Mara replied, meeting her gaze. We use. Jonah, you're on point for the breach. Your size gets through the vents clean. Kale, cover fire if it goes loud. Lena, you and me on the data pull. Jonah's jaw tightened, but he nodded. The weight of her choice from earlier. The decision to torch that supply depot, drawing patrols away but dooming a few stragglers, hung between them unspoken. Freedom's price was blood, and hers was just beginning. She pushed it down, focusing on the map. They had hours until nightfall. Plans like this didn't survive contact with the Accord's reality, but they had to try. The rendezvous with Elin came at dusk, in the shadow of a derelict processing plant on the city's edge. Mara waited alone, the team holed up a block away. The alien emerged from the fog like a ghost, his elongated frame hunched under a hooded cloak, iridescent skin dulled by the grime. Elin's eyes, multifaceted and probing, fixed on her with that clinical curiosity that made her skin crawl. You came, he said, voice a low hiss through his translator implant. He extended a data sliver, glinting in the low light. The override, full access to the server core. Mara took it, her fingers brushing his. Cool, alien. And the bargain? Elin's mandibles clicked softly, a nervous tick. My protégée, Alara. She's compiled half your signals tech, the Accord sniffing close. Guarantee her immunity, extraction if needed, no reclassification, no labs. She weighed it, the sliver heavy in her palm. Ilara was a name, a shadow helping from afar, but trading one life for the assault's success. It reeked of the same paternal deals the Accord peddled. Control masked as care. Mara's protectiveness flared, thinking of Jonah, of the kids they'd lost already. But hesitation meant more collars, more broken spirits. Done, she said, voice steady. But if this sours, your name's first on the broadcast. Elin's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something. Relief? Calculation? Curiosity drives me, human. Your resilience? It's data worth preserving. Reduce the cruelty, perhaps reorder the hierarchy. He turned, vanishing into the mist without another word. Mara pocketed the sliver and signaled the team. The moral knot twisted in her gut, but she swallowed it. Bargains like this were the insurgency's lifeblood. Dirty, necessary. Night fell heavy over the city, the twin moons casting a sterile glow on the registry's spires. The team moved like shadows through the service alleys, hoods up, breather masks muffling their steps. Jonah led, slipping into the east conduit with a grace that belied his impulsiveness. Mara followed close, the vent's metal biting cold against her knees. Inside, the air hummed with the server's pulse. Endless racks of glowing cores storing every domestication decree, every pet registration. They emerged in a sub-level corridor, sterile white walls humming under emergency lights. Lena jacked into the first terminal, Elin's code unlocking it with a soft chime. Data flooded the screen, legal files on the pet program, classifications branding humans as wards in perpetuity. Copying now, Lena whispered, her fingers flying. Varu's signatures everywhere. Authorizations for the spectacles, the reconditioning surgeries. Mara nodded, her pulse steady. Jonah, rig the broadcast, tap into the public nets, loop it to every Accord terminal. He worked fast, splicing a portable emitter to the core. Footage pulled from the files. Varu in a polished chamber, his voice calm and authoritative. Greenlighting the program's expansions. Hierarchical order demands it, he intoned on the grainy vid. Humans thrive under guidance. Autonomy invites chaos. The broadcast went live with a digital whoosh, rippling out to alien households, news feeds, the Accord's own propaganda channels. Mara imagined the shock. Citizens seeing their console's paternal mask crack, revealing the iron beneath. Alarms shrieked seconds later, red lights pulsing. "Breach detected!" a synthetic voice blared. Drones whirred from ceiling vents, their stun beams lancing out. Kale fired first, his scavenged pulse rifle cracking the lead drone's casing. Sparks rained. "Move! Transport's incoming!" They bolted, data drive clutched in Lena's fist. But the registry's security was a vice. Prison transports, hulking armored haulers meant for rounding up strays, screeched into the bays outside, rerouted by automated protocols. Guards poured out, their exosuits gleaming, plasma rifles humming to life. The team burst into the loading docks, where a cluster of freed human wards, ones they'd signaled earlier for a mass breakout, waited in the chaos. Dozens, ragged and hopeful, eyes wide at the promise of the assault. But the guards opened fire without pause, beams slicing the air. Mara dove behind a crate, dragging Jonah down as a ward beside them crumpled, chest smoking. Screams echoed, the acrid scent of burned flesh mixing with ozone. Kyle laid down suppressing fire, dropping 2 guards, but a transport's cannon swiveled, blasting a path through the crowd. Bodies fell, 5, 6 more, trampled or vaporized in the stampede. "Go!" Mara yelled, hauling Jonah toward a side exit. Lena and Kyle covered, but the cost clawed at her. Those wards, counting on the plan, cut down because the broadcast triggered the lockdown too soon. They spilled into the night, lungs burning, the team's breaths ragged as they melted into the alleys. Sirens wailed citywide, the broadcast's fallout igniting a chord response. Mara glanced back. Flames licked the docks, shadows of the dead unmoving. Back in the Warrens, hours later, the air was thick with silence broken only by the drip of water. The team slumped against the walls, faces streaked with grime and blood. Lena nursed a singed arm. Kyle cleaned his rifle with mechanical focus. Jonah paced, his fists clenched, eyes locked on Mara. "That was slaughter," he spat finally, voice cracking with fury. "We promised them out. Those people, kids, Mara, they died because you pushed the broadcast early. Avoidable, all of it." Mara met his gaze, the weight of the dead pressing on her chest. Her protectiveness surged. Jonah was her ward once, her responsibility. But his words cut deep, echoing her own doubts. "We got the files, Varu's exposed. That's the spark." "Spark?" Jonah stepped closer, voice rising. "You bargained with Elin, rushed the plan, and now we're knee-deep in this without a real exit strategy?" Mara's jaw tightened as she met Jonah's gaze in the dim glow of the transport's cabin. The hum of the engines vibrated through her boots, a steady reminder that they were already committed. Around them, the other raiders, 8 humans, scarred and silent, checked their scavenged pulse rifles, faces etched with the kind of resolve that came from too many close calls. She could feel the weight of their eyes, waiting for her to steady the ship. "Exit strategy is the facility in ruins," she said, her voice low and even, like she'd practiced it in the mirror of her old caregiver quarters. "Island's intel is solid. We hit the sterilization lines, cut off the collars and the surgeries. No more turning our people into compliant shells. That's the spark, Jonah. The one that lights the whole damn accord on fire." He didn't back down, his young frame coiled like a spring, eyes burning with that impulsive fire she'd seen too many times. Jonah had been her ward once, a boy she'd shielded from the aliens' endless conditioning sessions. Now he was a man, or close enough, but the protectiveness in her chest hadn't faded. Losing him here would break something in her she couldn't afford to lose. "Solid?" He snorted, gesturing at the flickering holomap projected on the bulkhead. The sterilization facility loomed ahead, a squat fortress of alloy and force fields on the edge of the industrial sprawl. "One behaviorist with a guilty conscience, and we're betting everything on him not flipping? What if this is just another trap, Mara?" "Varu's been 2 steps ahead since the pet markets." The transport banked sharply, the pilot's voice crackling over the comm. "Approaching drop zone, shields up in 30. Mara placed a hand on Jonah's shoulder, firm enough to ground him. "Then we make it our trap. You lead the vault team, get those forged records broadcasting. I'll handle the assault lines with the rest. We move fast, we move quiet, until we can't. Trust me like I trust you." He held her stare a beat longer, then nodded, the tension easing just a fraction. "Don't get yourself collared again. I can't pull you out twice." She almost smiled, but the memory of her own reconditioning scars, faint lines under her sleeve, killed it. "Won't need to." The ramp hissed open, and they spilled out into the facility's shadow perimeter, the acrid tang of chemical runoff stinging the air. Mara signaled the split. Jonah and 3 others peeled off toward the vault access, vanishing into the maintenance conduits like ghosts. She led the main group forward, pulse rifle humming warm in her grip. The facility's outer guards, drone sentries mostly, patrolled in lazy arcs, their sensors sweeping for unauthorized biosigns. Humans registered as wards, unless you knew the overrides Elin had slipped them. They struck clean. Mara dropped the first drone with a suppressed shot, its casing sparking as it crumpled. The others followed her lead, dismantling the perimeter with practiced efficiency. No alarms yet. Inside, the sterilization halls stretched like a nightmare assembly line. Conveyor belts of gleaming collars, surgical pods humming with neural blockers, the faint moans of half-processed humans echoing from containment cells. The sight twisted her gut, reminders of the households she'd fled, the care that masked control. "Lines first," she whispered into her comm. "Blow the fabricators." Her team fanned out, planting charges on the collar presses. Explosions ripped through the air in controlled bursts, metal shrieking as machinery warped and died. Alarms finally wailed, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Alien technicians, custodial Accord Greys in their crisp uniforms, scrambled from side rooms, fumbling for comms. Mara's rifle barked, dropping 2 before they could raise the alert. The humans moved like a unit, calm under fire, their politeness a thin veil over the danger uncoiling inside. One raider, a wiry woman named Lena, who'd lost her entire family to reconditioning, paused to free a dazed human from a pod. "Easy," she murmured, helping him to his feet. "You're out now." But the core was deeper, the heart of the beast. That's where Elin waited, or so his last message had said. Mara pushed toward the engineering bay, corridors blurring as reinforcements poured in. Pulse fire scorched the walls, forcing her to dive behind a crate stack. A Accord enforcer loomed at the junction, its elongated limbs wielding a stunner that could fry nerves in seconds. She rolled out, firing from the hip. Her shot caught it square in the chest plate, the alien crumpling with a gurgle. "Core access," she gasped into the comm. "Island, we're inbound." Static. Then his voice, clipped and precise. "Delayed. Security protocols engaged. Proceed without me. I'll handle the overload manually." She cursed under her breath, kicking open the bay door. The core chamber thrummed with energy, a massive reactor pulsing blue light, conduits snaking like veins. Island stood at the control pedestal, his slender alien frame dwarfed by the machinery. Tendrils of his species' neural interface already plugged into the system. His eyes, compound and flickering, met hers through the haze. "Go," he said, no preamble. "The fail-safes are locked. I reroute power here. It chains through the whole plant, but it stays with me." Mara hesitated, rifle still raised against the shadows. Elin had been their wild card from the start, the scientist who'd studied human cues for the Accord, then funneled them tech under the table. Curiosity, he'd called it. Reducing cruelty. But she saw the calculation in his stance now, the way his tendrils trembled. Self-preservation warring with something deeper, maybe atonement for the pets he'd helped break. "You're sure?" It wasn't a question. She knew the answer. He inclined his head, a human gesture he'd picked up. "For science, for balance, Tell my protege, Kyle, that the data was worth it." The first enforcers breached the outer doors, and Mara fired a covering burst. "We owe you. Pay it forward." His interface glowed brighter, systems whining as he bypassed the safeties. Alarms escalated, the core's hum turning to a roar. She retreated, her team laying suppressive fire as the base sealed behind them. Seconds later, the overload hit. A chain of detonations that shook the facility like an earthquake. Walls buckled, flames licking from vents, the sterilization lines collapsing in a symphony of ruin. Collars melted in heaps. Surgical tools shattered. Island sacrifice bought them the window they needed, the plant's destruction sealing the supply chain shut. Deeper in, Jonah's voice crackled over the comm. "Vault secured, records uploading, forged classifications going live. Humans as persons, not property. Broadcasting to the network now." Mara allowed herself a breath as she regrouped in the central atrium, smoke stinging her eyes. The wider alien net would light up with a hack. Legal reclassifications, backed by Elan's pilfered codes, declaring every human under Accord law a sentient with rights. It wouldn't stick overnight, but it cracked the foundation, forcing debates, divisions. Then the counterstrike came. Varu's deputy, a mid-rank bureaucrat named Trell, all pomp and no spine, emerged from a side office, hands raised, his uniform singed. "Surrender terms," he broadcast, voice amplified. "The consul offers amnesty for the facility's return. No reconditioning. Integration as protected associates." Mara's team encircled him, rifles trained. The humans they'd freed huddled nearby, eyes wide with a mix of hope and terror. Trell's offer hung in the air, a lifeline laced with poison. Amnesty meant collars off, but leashes on. Varu's spectacle of control repackaged. She stepped forward, her face a mask of calm. Jonah's team arrived then, him at the front, the vault console still smoking in his hands. He saw Trell, saw the plea, and something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe mercy. But Mara knew better. Varu's deputies didn't surrender. They stalled. A counterstrike force was minutes out, Accord cruisers inbound to reclaim the site. Mercy here meant their deaths. The movement crushed before the broadcasts could spread. "Execute him," she ordered, voice steady as steel. Her flaw stared back at her, the protectiveness that made her ruthless, the brutality she'd sworn off in those old household days. Lena hesitated, glancing at Jonah, but another raider stepped up, rifle butt cracking against Trell's skull before the shot rang out. The deputy's body slumped, blood pooling on the grated floor. The freed humans flinched, one vomiting quietly. Word spread fast. The execution hit the networks before the smoke cleared. Images of the deputy's corpse, broadcast alongside the reclassifications. Alien moderates, those fence-sitters in the Accords Council, recoiled. Diplomatic channels lit up with outrage. "Barbarism from the pets," one faction decried, pulling support from sympathetic outposts. Allies Elan had quietly cultivated, scientists, low-level officials, distanced themselves, fearing the fracture. Political,